And that is a problem which we confront today, that it's now considered normal that one reason for becoming a politician and coming into power is to make money. I give you an example of Tony Blair, the former British Prime Minister, who had very little money, in fact none at all, when he became Prime Minister, and who is now a multi-millionaire. And the network of companies of which he is engaged with was published in the Financial Times, a whole page of it. And many people in Britain were shocked because they did not know the extent of it. Because that is the world these politicians mingle in, all the time. You know, you look at Obama, intelligent enough guy, but he talks in a way which even previous US presidents didn't talk about Wall Street millionaires. Oh, I know them, they're my type of people. Well, that is it. People with money are the politicians' type of people. And the politicians often feel very envious of them. And so, political corruption has spread like a cancer. All over, I mean, it exists in many parts of the world, but it's now captured Europe. There is not a single country in which there hasn't been senior politicians involved in large-scale corruption. The French Socialist Party, under Jospin, which privatized more industries than the Conservatives. Numerous scandals. The minister for, two cabinet ministers were tried for corruption, for taking money in kickbacks. In Germany, you had Schröder as chancellor, who made the big deal with Russian gas companies. The minute he leaves politics, he becomes an employee of the same company. Now, there's nothing illegal in that, but I'm just saying that there's an open door policy. Industry, politics, politics, industry. They work together. So politicians become essentially a big lobby for big industry. And they concentrate on that. And the neoliberal economic system helps them because it says that the market is dominant. And you know what is astonishing is that despite the collapse of the Wall Street system in 2008, there has been no real attempt to ask for even reforms within capitalism, which they did in the 30s and after the Second World War. And so it's worth asking ourselves why. And I think the reason is very clear, that in the 30s you had large organized trade union movements. People say Obama should be like Roosevelt and push through a New Deal, but he can't, because capital is too powerful. And the workers' movement, the trade unions in the United States have been crushed, they're very weak. At the time Roosevelt pushed through the New Deal, you had factory occupations. Car factories were being occupied by workers. These factories have all gone now. They aren't there. When I was traveling through the United States last year, I went to Detroit, which is like a ghost city. It's a city which should be really a museum. I went to the factory where the first Ford car was manufactured. Ford factory, the birthplace of Fordism. They didn't even preserve it as a museum. It was falling down, bricked up, all gone. And together with it went the jobs. A few things are still left, but by and large, it's not a city for living people. And you go through neighborhood after neighborhood, nothing. Empty houses, empty mansions. An American friend of mine who was showing me Detroit, he said, "Have you got $10,000? I said, "No, but why?" He said, "You could buy that house." I said, "Why should I buy that house?" And he said, "That's a question everyone else asks too." So, this is a system now which doesn't produce the mass opposition that is necessary to even produce reforms within capitalism. What happened when the collapse happened of 2008? What happened was very simple. Most people, because of the culture in which we live, dominated by individuals and celebrity lifestyles, preferred to concentrate on individual bankers. The mass media took up, look at this guy, he's a banker. Look at the money he took last year in bonus payments. It was, 15 million. Okay, this is obscene, we know that. But it's the system that produces these people. There was no desire to look at the system and accuse it. Instead, people went and stood outside the homes of individual bankers and held up slogans saying, greedy pigs. Well, fine. These guys are not particularly bothered by that. The same thing happened in Britain. So you didn't have the big mass pressure from below that existed in the 30s and 40s to push through any changes. And capitalism never pushes through changes which it regards as beneficial to its enemies for no rhyme or reason. The other big difference in the 30s and 40s was that the Soviet Union existed. And however weak it was, at that time many people said there's an alternative because we have this crisis, they don't have this crisis. Now the collapse of all alternatives and the collapse of the trade unions, the deindustrialization, has meant that there has been no mass opposition to the crisis, except in Greece. Except in Greece, but even in Greece, it's very interesting. I mean, I know that country well, and many friends who are actively engaged now. But if you look at how the right in Greece operated, it was clever. They saw the crisis coming, there's no doubt about it. Karamanlis almost said that and called a quick election which they knew they were going to lose. So the centre-left won, and the centre-left PASOK has now to push through these appalling programs that are being demanded by the IMF and the European Union. And these programs are going to damage the social structure of that country and the psychological well-being of the majority of the Greek people. What is being demanded is horrendous. And what they have convinced themselves, and if you read the media, they say these Greeks are being irresponsible, coming out onto the streets and all that. They know what they are fighting for. They know that their way of life, elementary reforms which they had won, are under threat. So they are fighting for them. And that is a surprise to many people, but the reason is that the Greek trade union movement had not been totally crushed. They were still there. They have to think more creatively, in my opinion, but they were still there. And a similar thing would happen in France if such measures were pushed through in France, because the public sector unions remain very strong, even in that country, as they do in Germany, by the way. So for them to push through measures like this in those two countries would be very difficult, if not impossible, because they would be nervous of provoking anger. But Greece is the first real sign of mass anger against this particular system. But what I was going to say is we shouldn't be carried away, because I have looked at the figures and numbers in Greece. It's down now, but when the crisis first began, 60% of the Greek population said that the government was right to accept the conditions being imposed by the European Union and the IMF. 60%. Gradually, as they realized the extent of these reforms, the figure went down. And now the approval ratings is down to 40%.